Hello everyone, Brian Kibler here with another in my constructed video series with StarCityGames.com. And I suppose I might as well start calling this my Temur video series because that's pretty much all I've actually made videos for since the standard format started. The good reason for that, I think Temur is a really exciting and fun deck. It's a really good deck too, I think. And this deck in particular, this week in particular, I'm exploring some pretty significant changes compared to my previous build. You'll note that I've increased my curve pretty significantly. I now have a Sarkhan and 4 Stormbreath Dragons in my main deck. And I've cut Heir of the Wilds, and I've also cut Elvish Mystic. I've replaced Elvish Mystic with Sylvan Caryatid, and Heir of the Wilds, has gotten the boot in favor of going a little bit bigger. A big part of the reason for that change is that I feel like without Temur Charm in the deck, which was a card that I cut to make room for Stubborn Denial, and just because it was kind of underperforming as the format has gotten faster, that the value of a card like Heir of the Wilds has gone down. One, you no longer have the sort of Temur Charm Heir of the Wilds fight interaction to kill anything, which is minor but relatively meaningful. And two, without Temur Charm in the deck, you don't have the same incentive to play cheap creatures and then hold up mana on your opponent's turn. So tapping out and casting big creatures, or tapping low and casting big creatures, is sort of much more reasonable line of play for the deck. So I wanted to go back to Stormbreath Dragon, in particular with Stormbreath Dragon, along with Stubborn Denial. There's a lot of decks that have a lot of trouble dealing with that in the current standard. Abzan, obviously, is one of the most popular decks in standard, and they have a lot of trouble with Stormbreath Dragon. They basically have Hero's Downfall or Elspeth that can kill it. And if you have Stubborn Denial or you pressure their Hero's Downfalls and force them to use it on some of your earlier creatures, you can end up just taking a game single-handedly with Stormbreath Dragon. So that's really the sort of major change in the dynamic of the main deck here. It also let me switch the land around a little bit. One of the problems that I had before when I was playing the Elvish Mystic version was that in order to really live the dream of Elvish Mystic into Savage Knuckleblade, you need to play a lot of lands that could produce a lot of non-forest lands that could produce green mana on turn 1. So I ended up having Yavimaya Coast and a bunch of mana confluences. And I was losing a lot of games due to just damage from my lands against a lot of the more aggressive decks in the format. And I didn't really like that. So I was trying to move away from that and was having a little bit of color mana issues sometimes, and decided that the value of Elvish Mystic has dropped pretty significantly, or maybe it's possible it just wasn't that good to begin with. As the format's gotten more aggressive, having more pain lands in your deck has gotten to be a higher cost, and the Sylvan Caryatid just gives a lot more consistency in terms of being able to accelerate into your threats because it's a mana creature that your opponent can't easily remove, and it also helps fix your mana overall. Like with Elvish Mystic, you couldn't even use it to cast Savage Knuckleblade if you played it off a basic forest. You can't cast Ashcloud Phoenix, accelerate into Ashcloud Phoenix unless you have 2 more red lands if you get basic forest into Elvish Mystic. Whereas with Sylvan Caryatid, it helps fix all of these mana color issues as well as accelerate you. So that's the change that I went with there. I think that this is a much more sort of like a monster-style deck splashing Stubborn Denial and Savage Knuckleblade than the sort of Temur aggro deck that I was playing before. So a bit of a different style. One sort of question mark in my mind is what the 3-drop other than Savage Knuckleblade should be. Right now I have Boon Satyr, which is the same as for my previous deck, and it's possible that I should have Courser in the deck, because Courser is a card that gives the deck a little bit of a different angle. If the deck is playing a little bit less aggressively, then the life gain and the ability of Courser to defend you, as well as to generate advantages over games that do play out longer, is pretty valuable. And also just with the mana curve going up, the Courser's ability to get you extra land is a lot more valuable as well. Boon Satyr, on the other hand, is pretty valuable not only for just being a threat that can bestow on some of your flyers in particular, which makes it very powerful. You can get a lot of evasive damage in with it, but it's also a guaranteed trigger for Stubborn Denial and Crater's Claw's monstrous ability, or rather ferocious ability. So with Stubborn Denial in your deck, having ways to guarantee that you can easily turn it on, especially cheaply with Boon Satyr and Savage Knuckleblade, is very valuable. And it's possible that swap is one that I am going to make ultimately, but I wanted to try it with the Boon Satyrs in the deck because I feel like they go most strongly with the sort of synergies that are present here. Sideboard wise, I've been mixing around my sideboard quite a bit. there's a lot of different decks that you need to take into consideration. In particular, after the success of Yuya and some other players with the Jeskai token deck, I wanted to have better ways to interact with those strategies. Arc Lightning has replaced some of my Magma Sprays as a cheap removal spell of choice. It's a little bit weaker against decks like Heroic. Well, it's actually a lot weaker against decks like Heroic, but it is still very strong against decks like Mono Red or other sort of cheap creature decks that play multiple guys, and it can take out multiple tokens at once. Barrage of Boulders is actually an interesting card that I had thought about playing before. I had like one copy of my sideboard, I think maybe in one of the previous videos that I did. But it not only is a great answer to token strategy because it deals 1 damage to all of their creatures, it's also quite powerful against other green decks, in particular decks like the Sidisi Whip decks, like that Witch... just jumbling here. Like that Witch Shahar won the World Championships last weekend. So, it can kill Hornet Queen tokens. They just force all your opponents, big creatures to be unable to block on the ground. So a very powerful effect in multiple different ways. So that's a card that I want to be trying here. Chandra, similarly, is a card that is a reasonable card in mid-range matchups against decks like Mardu, the ability to kill your opponent's token creatures from Portling Outburst or whatever, is not the most valuable portion of it, but it is fairly valuable. And it also can just provide you with card advantage as the game goes on. So I have 4 copies of Disdainful Stroke, up from 3 in previous builds. That is largely because I think that decks like Sidisi Whip or Abzan are likely to be higher popularity after the results of the World Championship, with those decks meeting in the finals. So that's really the sort of idea behind this particular build of this deck. Now let's go see it in action.